In this lesson, we're going to get an introduction to the material editor. Alright, so we want to start creating materials. So how do we go about creating a new material? Well, to do this, we need to go to our content browser. And in the content browser, we'll want to go into something like our materials folder or a new folder that we've created. So in this case, I'm just going to put it in the materials folder. And we're going to come up here and we're going to go to new. And in our menu here, we'll see that we have a material option. We can go ahead and create that. And you'll see that in the asset view, we can see the new material that has been created. Now we need to give it a name. So let's go ahead and just call it DT_MAT for material. And you'll see that it has been created. It doesn't really look like much. It's just a checkered pattern on our material. Now, how do we open it up? How do we start working with it? Well, to do that, we'll simply double-click on the material, and it'll open it up in the material editor. Now, you can open up any other material if you like. You can open up this brick material, which is already created for us, and it's got lots of different nodes and inputs all strung together and put into our final output here. But let's go ahead and close that down, go back to our clear material to where there's nothing in there, and let's talk about the interface. Now let's go ahead and take the tab here and let's dock that right next to our content browser so we can see everything nice and neatly. So looking here at the top, we have our menu bar. The menu bar is going to give us access to lots of different operations and commands. Pretty standard across this. We have the toolbar. The toolbar is going to give us quick access to some of those commands like live nodes and update. These are really helpful to show us the look of the texture at a specific point whenever we're hooking all of those nodes together. And we can get a live update, which will kind of show us if we even have any animation going on in our materials. So that's the toolbar. We have the viewport here on the left side, and the viewport will give us a preview of our material once we start putting in inputs into our final output here. And in the viewport, we can change the shape of the previewed mesh. So in this case, it's going to be a sphere by default, but we can change it to something like a cylinder, a plane, a cube, or we could even change it to a static mesh that we have in our content browser. So to do that, you'll go to your content browser, go to props, and go ahead and select this static mesh map preview mesh. Left click on that, it's just highlighted, and go into your material editor and then click on that icon. And you'll see that that mesh shows up here in the preview, okay, or in your viewport. So you can move around just like you would any other viewport. Hold down the left mouse button to orbit around the object. The middle mouse button will allow you to pan, and then the right mouse button will allow you to zoom in and out. Okay. So once we have that viewport set, we can go ahead and take a look at the rest of the interface. So we have the details underneath here. The details are going to give us access to things like the blend mode of the material, the lighting that it's going to be using, and lots of different other parameters that we can use. Now we'll be talking about those as we begin creating our own materials a little bit later. So from the details, let's go to the other side to our palette. Now the palette is where all of our nodes live, and we can simply left click and drag one of these nodes and put it into our workspace, which is the main portion of where we'll be working whenever we create materials. So looking at the different nodes, there are different ways that we can find the nodes. We can simply scroll down and look for the node that we're looking for, and as you can see, there is an entire list of all of those, and it can be very cumbersome, especially if you've never seen this before. You could also search for a specific node. So let's say that we wanted to add a texture to our scene. We could simply type in texture, and you'll see that we get lots of different nodes there. If we wanted to narrow that down even more, I know that what I'm looking for is a texture sample. So I could actually type that in, texture sample, and there you see texture sample. Okay. Now you can look things up that way. You can choose through all of the categories if you like. So you see we have an atmosphere category, a blends category. We can also filter by category. So we can go to expressions or we can choose functions only. Okay, either way will work. Normally I just stick to all, and sometimes I really won't even use the palette all that often because I can access these nodes by simply right clicking in the workspace, and it'll bring up this menu here. So we can look for our texture. So if I scroll down to my texture category, Here we go. And I can bring in a texture sample. Okay, and all we have to do if we want to bring this node into our workspace is simply left click and drag that in. Okay, so here we can drag that in. We could also left click and drag it from here. Now the great thing about the palette is it also gives us an idea of what the keyboard shortcut is for those particular nodes. And a lot of these, well, not a lot, but most of these will have a keyboard shortcut that will help us with the creation. Now the ones that have keyboard shortcuts are the ones that are most commonly used in a lot of different materials. And so familiarizing yourself with some of those keyboard shortcuts could be really helpful. So for example, like the texture sample, let me go ahead and hit delete to delete that out. The texture sample is actually holding down T on the keyboard and then left clicking in the workspace, and that will bring that in. Now whenever you're bringing nodes in, like this texture sample, we can actually add files to them very, very quickly by going to the content browser, and let's select a texture. Let's choose like this brick texture here, and we'll go back to our material. If I hold down T and left click again, notice that this texture sample is going to have that brick texture that we just highlighted in our content browser attached to it. And so it's kind of like what we did here with the static mesh. Okay, so just a couple of different ways of creating nodes there. Now, just like you normally would, you can select them and hit delete on the keyboard, delete those out. Okay, and then working in the workspace, it's pretty much like working in the orthographic view. You hold down the right mouse button to pan around. You could also use your mouse wheel to zoom in and out. Okay, and then the left mouse button will allow you to select around certain nodes. Okay, all right. So now that we've talked about that, let's go ahead and get into our next lesson where we're going to talk about actually creating a material, bringing those nodes in, hooking their inputs and outputs together to create a final material. And we'll get started with that in our next lesson.